Good evening and welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your night to join us for this public hearing. This is a public hearing for an application received by EGLE for Arbor Preserve Development in Lodi Township, Washtenaw County. My name is Ryan Blazik. I'm with EGLE's Environmental Support Division. I'm just going to be your moderator for tonight's hearing. All right, and as such, I just have a couple things to go through before we get started. This is what the evening is going to look like. We're going to start off with the introduction that we're doing right now. And the big thing to keep in mind is that there's two parts to tonight. The first part is an informational session where the applicant has an opportunity to describe the project and provide some information on it, followed by question and answer. So you'll have an opportunity to ask a question. And we'll explain how we're going to do that later. And that isn't going to go any further past 6:30. And then we'll go through the other ways to submit an official comment, and then we'll start the official hearing portion, which is where everybody is going to have an opportunity to make a statement for the record on this application and project. We'll also cover where to find other information and who to contact in case there are further questions that come up. All right, in case you haven't joined us for one of these hearings before, all lines are going to be muted during the hearing. So you can hear us, but we can't hear you. However, you will have an opportunity to ask a question verbally during the question and answer session, which will be a little bit later on, and of course, to make your statement during the hearing portion. You can submit questions using the Q&A box in your Zoom toolbar. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. We'll take questions during the Q&A period during that as well, and we'll explain how that'll run later too. And also, just so you're aware, we are recording this hearing. We'll be posting this recording on our YouTube channel in a couple days, so you'll be able to find it there in case you wanted to forward it on or watch it again. All right, and it's at this point, I would like to invite our other EGLE staff on the line to turn their cameras on and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jim Bales, work out of with the Water Resources Division out of the Jackson District Office, and I'm the permit processor for this application.
Hi, and I'm Jeff Pierce. I'm the district supervisor for our Lansing and Jackson District Office Water Resource Division.
All right, thank you both. I also just want to mention we have Caitlin DeVries on the line, who you'll probably be seeing some items in the chat from. All right, and then we're going to move right on to this informational session. So the applicant has an opportunity to say a few words on the project. And so we're going to see if we have Jason and Scott from Toll Brothers on the line, and we'll unmute them. It looks like Jason is unmuted. And let's see if we have.
Good evening.
Good evening, Jason. Is Scott with you, or with you?
He is not. It'll just be myself this evening.
Oh, okay. Got you. Thanks for letting us know. I do have a diagram here if it's helpful, but if you want to say a few words on the project, that would be great.
Yeah, so this project, first and foremost, is a project that Toll Brothers got that started working on last year. It's a part of a consent judgment that was in Lodi Township, started years ago, and started with a multifamily development with a large amount of units being at the time it was R3 zoning, which allowed for the number. I'm trying to find it here. I apologize. I've got my meeting outline open, but it was around 434 units is what the original development was for. And negotiations between the township and past developers worked towards what sort of is now the current plan that Toll Brothers has sort of bought into, which is 107 single family housing units. It roughly works out to one house per net acre of property. And so the 107 home consent judgment had a preliminary area plan that we were sort of charged with. For those that don't know, a consent judgment is basically a court order. And there was a preliminary plan tied to that consent judgment that we were sort of bound to honor and respect the layout that had been negotiated over months prior to us getting involved, actually close to a year. And so when we took ownership of the property, we began working on putting together what is the final site plan. So that's sort of the stage that it's at now. And this plan just received final site plan approval from the Lodi Township Board last Monday. And since that time, we've worked with Lodi Township staff and their engineering consultants to really improve upon the preliminary area plan that was a part of the first amendment to the consent judgment. We've made a really strong effort to reduce the impacts to the existing wetlands by reducing the amount overall of the impacts. And then by trying to work with yourself, the state of Michigan, on making sure that the stream stayed intact by trying to shift and move lots around and grading, changing some of the grading in order to keep some of those stream corridors largely intact. And I'm not sure if our consultants from Nice Wander are here, but they could probably go into a little bit more detail on some of that. But what I'm getting at is we worked really hard to make the plan actually better than the plan that was tied to the consent judgment. And I think we've achieved that. And so this project will use on-site wells for individual homes. So water will come through a regular potable water well on each individual site. There won't be any kind of community well. And there will be one package wastewater treatment plant for each site, which is based on the consent judgment. So we're not deviating from that. So that's sort of a broad brush overview of the project.
Okay, yeah, thanks for providing that information, Jason. We can go right into the question and answer session next. So this is your opportunity to ask a question related to this application and project for those on the line. And so the way you can ask a question is a couple different ways. You can either type it in the Q&A box, in the question and answer box in your Zoom toolbar that you see at the bottom of your screen. Just type the question in and send it to us. Or if you prefer to ask your question verbally, you can click the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. And so what we'll do is we will unmute you, call on you using your name in Zoom, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. If we have people calling in by phone, by telephone, it looks like we might have one or two. You're also welcome to ask a question. You just select #2 on your receiver, and what that will do is that will raise your hand in Zoom, and then you can ask your question. We'll unmute you, calling you using the last 4 digits of your phone number, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. And so those are the ways. A quick thing to keep in mind, though, is this period of time is the opportunity to ask questions. If you have a statement that you want to make on this project, please hold on to that until we get to the hearing part, so you can make that during the hearing portion for it to be a official part of the record. So we'll try to take some questions now. All right, here we go. These would be directed to you, Jim, and then if you feel you need to direct it to someone else, feel free, that could answer it. How many private wastewater treatment plants are already in service in Washtenaw County? Is the first question.
I don't know that answer. The wastewater treatment plants and the NPDES permitting process are outside of our program and outside of this application review. I don't know that answer.
And then it's kind of a separate related answer to the septic field. It says, why are the properties using septic fields? And I'm assuming I mean, for our information, is that one and the same? The wastewater treatment, the private wastewater treatment plants are related to the septic fields?
I guess so. So you know, individual homes have a septic field associated with them generally, right? If there's not like a sewer line to tie into, for these sort of developments, wastewater treatment plants are often a part of that review. But again, it's really not related to our application unless there's a direct impact to wetlands or streams. So the water quality component is reviewed entirely by another program. We're only involved if there's a potential physical change to the stream or to the or if they would be making use of a wetland by discharging to wetland. And so that's why it's listed in the public notice for this application, because of allows us to review, if there's any potential changes to the stream and or permittable or unpermittable changes, and then the component to discharge to wetland, that triggers part of our review also.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Next question, and I actually see she has her hand raised. Susan Miller, we're going to unmute you so that you can ask your question if you'd like. I have to see you have a couple typed in here. So it looks like you are unmuted on our end, Susan. If you want to unmute your microphone and ask your question verbally, you're welcome to.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep, you're unmuted.
Okay. The zoning ordinance for Lodi Township says that Toll Brothers needs to secure drainage rights for neighboring properties. They have not done so. Why not?
I'll defer to Jason since he's on the screen here still. If Jason can answer that.
Yeah, I can understand Mrs. Miller's comment, but we kind of went over all of those issues with the township and their consultants with regard to their zoning ordinance, and we provided the township with the runoff coefficients for our site based on the 2 wastewater treatment plants plus all of the impervious surface, and it was determined that the water that would be placed into the drainage area for this particular project would be at about what a 1-year rain event, which is sort of the baseline for the amount of discharge from the plant itself and the impervious surface. So we've met that requirement.
All right. Thank you for your question, Susan and Jason, for answering. We're going to go on to another question. All right. Richard Strader. Richard, we are going to unmute you so that you can ask your question. Are you there?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much. Recently at a Lodi Township public hearing, the developer mentioned that there was a high likelihood that they would have to encroach at least on the wetland setback areas, if not the wetlands themselves, during the construction period. Is that something that EGLE has a stake in, or takes, is there some sort of policy around, how that's supposed to work? Are they supposed to try to avoid wetlands, and if they damage them, are supposed to restore them to the state they were in before they started, or what is the process around that?
Thanks for your question. Jim?
Yeah, so the applicant has proposed to directly impact wetlands, and so that's part of the review today, or the application that we're discussing here today, part of our review. As far as setbacks, that's out, EGLE doesn't have setbacks under our wetland statute, and so that's not directly part of our review. That would be through the local authorities, their wetland ordinance or any township rules and regulations. There are at times temporary, maybe you're asking about temporary impacts associated with like access, with like you said, grading, so there's the direct impact of grading, and then sometimes there might be, as far as access, some temporary impact that restoration, so if there's, that would be still something that would be reviewing and either authorizing or not authorizing, but if a permit was issued, that would normally be addressed there. And then there are restoration standards that would normally need to be met for areas that are only being temporarily impacted.
All right, thanks, Jim. And I saw Jeff popped his camera on. Did you have anything to add, Jeff, or just returning the camera?
No, I was just turning my camera on. I think Jim covered it.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you both. so we will go to another question, Michael McCarran, and then after Michael, we'll go to some questions in the Q&A box. So Michael, you're unmuted and you can ask your question.
Okay, very good. I'm still concerned about why, this is to my question about the having septic fields versus the, the drainage for like common, drainage to a septic treatment doesn't make sense to me. Because I live on a property that has septic and it works great, but I don't know why you're not considering the fields for each house. Because that way you don't have to deal with all of the, the common sewage, and that just seems very unnecessary and unsafe to me for the environment.
So the question is why not go for the fields, I guess?
Yes.
Or, okay.
I can maybe try to answer that.
Okay, yeah, feel free.
Again, this is Jason Icoangeli. I work for Toll Brothers. So at the beginning of the project, we had to do a soil analysis or soil testing, sort of like a geological study of the site. And it was determined by the study that we did and studies that were done in the past that the site is not suitable for what they call a conventional septic field, where there's a tank and then like a drain field that the effluent would go into and then percolate into the ground like you would traditionally have. That was one of the issues with this property historically. And the other part is that the wastewater treatment plants, typically discharge can also be underground as well. But again, the soils at this particular property are not conducive to discharging water even underneath the ground. So that's why there's surface drainage. The one thing I would add is that you have to remember about these wastewater treatment plants is that the state issues permits for these plants to both private and public organizations, and the standards are not any different. So any local government in the state of Michigan that would want to build and design a wastewater treatment plant, although it being probably much larger than the one we're building, still has to meet all the environmental standards and requirements. And because this plant will be a surface discharge plant, it even will have more rigorous standards than one that might otherwise discharge wastewater underground. So just to kind of shed some light on the fact that these wastewater treatment plants, they actually, in all honesty, are probably more environmentally safe than a traditional septic field where you're doing laundry and putting things down the toilet or washing things in a sink, maybe chemicals and things are finding their way into a drain in a house, and then they're just going into a concrete vault in your backyard, and the liquids are basically going out to the drain field and they're percolating into the groundwater table, and then all the solids remain, and then those kind of decompose over time. Whereas this wastewater treatment plant will bring in effluent. It goes through a mechanical treatment process through filtration, UV light, and the effluent that comes out of it is, I won't call it potable water because you obviously can't drink it, but it's not anything near the kind of gray water that comes out of just a regular residential septic tank into a drain field, where there's no filtration, nothing. All of the liquids, regardless if they're of what they are, just kind of go down the drain, so to speak, and into the groundwater table. So maybe that's helpful.
All right, yeah. Thanks for the response, Jason, and for the question, Michael. So I'm going to go to some questions that are typed in. What is the timeline for decision making on the permit?
The current application processing due date is in December. I'd have to open the file to double check that. Mid-December, like December 12th, around there.
All right, thanks, Joan. Can you clarify, this is 100 single-family homes on 107 single-family homes on 107 acres? Is the question?
Yeah, so the property is much larger than that. I think it's closer to 200, approximately 200 acres. Each of the sites has an open space preservation component, which is roughly 35 to 45%, depending on which site. That is where that other 100 acres goes to. But the 107 houses roughly are proportionate to one house per acre on that the 200 acre parcels, which there's two combined that meet that total. And why that is because Lodi Township's residential standards for homes are 1 acre minimum requirement. So although these lots aren't exactly 1 acre, it roughly proportions out to 1 home per net acre.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. What effects will increased stream pollution and water temperature have on the biological organisms in the stream?
Again, the water quality component isn't part of our review, and those kind of considerations do fall under the NPDES application review. There is an upcoming public hearing for the wastewater treatment plants scheduled for November 5th. I saw on our EGLE calendar, so there will be an opportunity. Like if the questions focused on water quality and those concerns, there will be an opportunity to kind of hear about that application review and then to ask, maybe more specific questions related to that program.
Oh, thanks, Jim. That's helpful. Let's see here. Is EGLE Water Resources Division looking at the downstream wetland impacts of the wastewater treatment plant effluent between this project and the Saline River? And maybe this falls more appropriately under the other permitting action and hearing. I don't know, you tell me,
Yeah.
Jim.
Yeah, it probably would. I mean, we still evaluate, if there's physical change. So part of what we've looked at or asked of the applicant is some pre and post numbers for the hydrology, the pre-development and post-development changes in hydrology. And so if there's concerns raised during that part of our review, then we make decisions accordingly or ask for more information, sometimes require monitoring. Just thinking of other applications I've reviewed, but as far as water quality specific issues, that would be related to the other programs.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks, Jim. We're going to go to some raised hands now. So Patricia Haroon. Patricia, we are going to unmute you, and then you can feel free to ask your question. Looks like you're unmuted on our end. You just have to unmute yourself. Yep. Are you there?
Thank you. I am here.
All right. Great.
So I actually didn't know I was going to get an opportunity. Thank you. So I wrote mine out. So it'll be a bit.
Well, just to confirm, is this a question, or do you want to make a statement on the application?
I thought we were still doing questions.
Yes, we are. I just wanted to make sure before you started. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm asking, how can the applicant be allowed to send higher volume and velocity effluent into the wetland area and a small stream that are adjacent to a property line?
So the last answer I gave as far as our pre and post development, but it sounds like your question maybe is more specific to water leaving the developed site and being discharged off site. Jeff, you have your mic off. Do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I can field this one and maybe provide a little more clarification because I think there's a bit of confusion here on the EGLE programs and what this hearing is regarding. So, so Patricia, to answer your question, that is part of our review. As Jim mentioned, we are looking at the pre and post hydrological changes on the site, and that's part of our review as we work through the application. And to be clear, the application, we have not made any decisions on this. We're still in the process of reviewing it and determining if what is proposed meets the criteria that's set under the law for a permit to be issued. And I think that kind of gets to the point of that question, both under the state's Part 301 and 303 statutes, which are inland lakes and streams protection statutes, as well as like Part 31, which is the state's water quality statutes. They set out specific criteria on what might need a permit and what would need to be met in order for a permit to be issued. And so, like I said, in our role, we're looking at it from that physical side of things, what secondary impacts might occur. And if we determine that as the if the proposed project meets the criteria that's laid out in that statute to, be allowed to have a permit issued, then a permit would be issued. But, if we find through our review that this would be an unacceptable impact or, adverse impact to these water resources, then a permit likely could not be issued. So that's part of what we're looking at. And then as well, our water quality unit, which is a part of our water resources division, but a separate unit that handles review of wastewater discharges and other pollutant discharges to water bodies under Part 31, they would be looking at what potential impacts from they'd be looking at what potential effluents and pollutants would be discharged from the wastewater treatment plants and determining is that acceptable, or potentially putting in requirements and conditions and limits to what could be discharged to ensure that there is no adverse pollutant discharge to these areas. So both of these, like right now, both of those types of impacts are being reviewed concurrently, but separately through our different programs. And so today, Jim and in my unit, we are looking solely at like the physical impacts and construction within the wetlands, lakes, and streams that can include the direct and secondary impacts laid out under Part 301 and 303. Our water quality unit is concurrently reviewing the Part 31 MPDES and Part 41 wastewater treatment plant construction permitting under their programs. And so they will be focused more on water quality and pollutant impacts to these water resources. As part of that, unfortunately, we can't really answer any questions directly related to that because that's not what this hearing today is focused on, but also that is being handled by a different group. As Jim mentioned, November 5th, we're going to have another hearing based on that program, specifically about those wastewater treatment plants. So, there'll be an opportunity to look into that phase and ask your questions and comments about that. But I just want to be clear, Jim and I might not be able to answer certain specific questions related to those water quality issues solely because that's just not what our role is in reviewing this. But that doesn't mean Water Resources Division doesn't have a role in reviewing that. It's just a separate group that's handling it. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for providing that clarification. So the hearing on the 5th is related to the water discharge and wastewater construction, is that correct? And then this is more on the physical impacts to on the property?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks. We have time for one more question before we have to move on to the next part of the hearing tonight. John Vine, we're going to unmute you, and then you can ask your question. And just for everyone's reference, so the next portion of tonight will be the hearing part where you can make a statement on this application. So John, you're unmuted. You can ask your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I don't think Susan Miller's question was adequately answered. And I think, this is on wetlands, and the impact is not necessarily on the wetlands the developer is the land that he's developing. It's on the downstream wetlands where the real concern's at. And what I just don't understand is how, if a developer is planning on discharging the treated sewage effluent from the north development into unnamed creek tributary of the Rouse Drain that has no flow approximately 50% of the time. So you're not discharging into the waters of the state, you're discharging onto somebody's land. And the discharge point is merely adjacent to the private property and it traverses throughout the full length of the owner's property. Now, typically, to discharge effluent across private property, a company or private party typically needs to secure a specific legal right from the landowner, which is commonly a drainage easement that grants the right to use another person's property for a specific purpose. This is just common sense. This must be formally granted by the property owner and is often filed as a restrictive covenant that runs with the land. Will EGLE hold up issuing any permit until this is resolved, and that Susan Miller gives them an easement to discharge across her property? That's my first question.
All right, thanks for the question, John. Any thoughts, Jim or Jeff?
If our permit's issued, if a permit is issued by us, it doesn't preclude someone from getting all other applicable, state, local, federal permits. So, if there's something else that's needed, they'd still be required to get that. But as far as like a drainage easement or anything like that, I can't really speak to what would be required there, but Jeff might have a better answer.
Am I still on mute, or can I speak?
Yeah, let's see if Jeff, do you have any clarification, Jeff, or thoughts before you go on, John? And
Well,
John,
yeah,
we'll have time for one more question from you, John, and then we'll move on. We're going to have to move on for.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, again, I mean, what we're looking at today is the environmental impact, and not necessarily the property rights situation there. Like us issuing a permit, as Jim said, does not override or overrule any needs for other additional easements or other authorizations from additional property owners if that is needed. We have to look at it solely under what the impacts to the environment would be.
All right.
Okay, well, we're adding over 7 million gallons of treated effluent that run through her property that wasn't there before. And those dry creek beds are not going to be able to handle that kind of flow at times. It may be able to handle it sometime, but not all the time. And her wetlands and her property will be harmed by that. So why can't you allow for the homeowner, the property owner, give them the rights first before you file the permit? It just seems we're asked backwards here. You're going to issue a permit for something that it's just patently wrong. It's just common sense. You shouldn't be able to trespass with your sewage effluent onto somebody else's property without their permission.
Okay.
But yep, and that would be a civil issue between them. But I do want to be clear, like, again, we've made no decisions on the application. We're still working through the process. If we do find that the discharge will cause an unacceptable disruption to the streams, then it's very likely that we would need to have that addressed before a permit could be issued, or a permit might have to be denied.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone who asked questions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all of them. Hopefully, we got to most, at least everybody's question, at least one question from everyone. I will be providing Jim's contact information later on tonight in case we didn't get to your question. So you'll be able to contact Jim, and he can maybe point you in the right direction, hopefully answer a question. But we have to move on to actually taking statements tonight. And so but it isn't the only way to make a statement. There are some other ways you can make a comment. On this application is through EGLE's My Enviro system under submission HQA-A2 7Z-K6DZS. And we'll put the link to this in the chat as well so that you'll be able to access it and can make a comment through My Enviro or by mail to EGLE, Water Resources Division at the Jackson District Office, P.O. Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. And the comment period will be open until November 7th. So that's when you'll be able to make additional comments. All right, so we're going to kick off the hearing part where you'll be able to make a statement tonight. And I would like to invite Jim to read the opening statement to get that started.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Got a kind of a long statement, so I'll start working on it here. And I start off by kind of reiterating the introduction, and then we'll jump through the whole process. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jim Bales, and I am the district representative in the Water Resources Division of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, also known as EGLE. I'll be serving as the hearings officer for this public hearing on EGLE submission number HQA A27Z K6DZS. With me tonight is Jeff Pierce, the Water Resources Division Supervisor for the Jackson and Lansing offices. To describe how this is going to work tonight, I will begin with some background information about why we are here. I will then describe the purpose of the hearing and how your comments will be used. Following that, I will outline the procedures under which we will take your comments and then describe what will happen after tonight's hearing. It will then be time for you to provide comments, and we'll spend the majority of the time tonight listening to those comments. At the end of the hearing, I'll read the closing statement. By way of background information, the Water Resources Division is responsible for administering a variety of programs that help protect inland lakes and streams, wetlands, floodplains, sand dunes, and the Great Lakes. These programs regulate certain activities such as dredging or filling a lake, stream, or wetland, constructing a dam, constructing a marina, placing shore protection, or constructing docks, and building in a designated critical sand dune area, wetland, or floodplain. The law governing those responsibilities is the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act, 1994, PA 451, as amended, known as Act 451. We are here tonight because Toll Brothers has proposed the following. They propose 1.62 acres of wetland impacts that include the placement of fill, excavation of material, installation of 2 equalization culverts, installation of boardwalks, installation of stormwater outfall structures, and treated stormwater discharges. Proposed stream impacts include the installation of 5 stream enclosures totaling 578 linear feet and site grading. Proposed impacts also include the installation of 2 wastewater treatment outfalls in upland that will discharge treated wastewater to wetlands and streams. In order for a permit to be granted, EGLE must find that the proposed activities described in the public notice meet certain criteria set by Part 301 Inland Lakes and Streams and Part 303 Wetlands Protection of Act 451. In general, we must consider the effect of the proposed project on the streams and wetlands. When reviewing an application for permit under the provisions of Part 301 Inland Lakes and Streams of Act 451, EGLE is charged to make the following considerations as required by Section 30106 of Part 301. The department shall issue a permit if it finds that the structure or project will not adversely affect the public trust or riparian rights. The department shall not grant a permit if the proposed project or structure will unlawfully impair or destroy any of the waters or other natural resources of the state. When reviewing an application for permit under the provisions of Part 303, Wetlands Protection of Act 451, EGLE is charged to make the following indications as required by Section 30311 of Part 303. A permit for an activity listed in Section 30304 shall not be approved unless the department determines that the issuance of a permit is in the public interest, that the permit is necessary to realize the benefits of the derived the benefits derived from the activity, and that the activity is otherwise lawful. Additionally, a permit shall not be issued unless it is shown that an unacceptable disruption will not result to the aquatic resources. A permit shall not be issued unless the applicant also shows either the following: that the proposed activity is primarily dependent on being located in the wetland, or that a feasible and prudent alternative does not exist. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to give anyone interested in the proposed subdivision project an opportunity to provide information that EGLE can use in making the decision whether or not to issue a permit. Please recognize that EGLE can only use the information you provide if it relates to the criteria that EGLE must use in making a decision. Some of you may simply want to express your support or opposition to the project, and we will be happy to make note of your position, but please understand that EGLE is by law not allowed to base our decision on whether or not there is widespread support or opposition to the project. In just a moment, I will outline the procedures we'll use for taking your comments, but before I do so, I need to mention that the notice of this hearing was published in the MLive Ann Arbor News on Sunday, October 19th, 2025. As we discussed at the beginning of the informational session, if you have a comment to provide, raise your hand in the Zoom toolbar. To ensure that the hearing is conducted in a fair manner, we will follow these steps. First, the applicant and or their consultant has already had an opportunity to describe the proposed project. Second, we will then call on those who have indicated in their registration that they would like to speak. After that, we will call on all those that raise their hand in their Zoom toolbar indicating that they would like to make a comment if they haven't already been called upon. As a reminder, if you are participating in this hearing via telephone only, follow the directions of the moderator on how to identify that you would like to make a comment. You may also submit your comments to EGLE via the My Enviro portal, by email, or US mail. When all the comments have been completed, we will ask if anyone else would like to make a statement. When your name is called, your microphone will be unmuted. As you begin your comments, please state your name and any group or association you may represent. Each person will be given 4 minutes to make their comments. We will indicate to you when you have a minute left. Please begin wrapping up your comments and end within the allotted time. If need be, we will indicate when your time has ended. I ask that we all be courteous and respectful to one another tonight. Please also recognize that EGLE staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your comments on the proposed project and to listen to those comments. This hearing is being recorded and your comments will be a part of the information EGLE will consider in making its decision on whether or not to issue a permit for the proposed project. The public comment period for this public hearing is open for 10 days from the date of this hearing, ending on November 7th, 2025. Additional information and comments submitted in writing during the 10-day public comment period will also be considered in EGLE's decision. Following the close of the public comment period, EGLE will make a decision to either issue a permit for the project as proposed or with modifications, or send a letter of denial. You may find out what the decision is by checking the EGLE My Enviro portal website and searching for the application number HQA A27Z K6DZS. Thank you for your attention. We will begin calling the names of those who have indicated that they would like to make a statement.
All right, thanks for reading that, Jim. As Jim mentioned, just to reiterate a couple things. Everybody has 4 minutes to make their statement. You will see a countdown timer in the upper right-hand side of your screen that counts down from 4 minutes, so you know how much time you have left. And then when you're down to 1 minute left, you'll hear this sound. Just so you know, you can check in your time so you know how much time you have left. You don't have to use the entire time that you're allotted, but it's going to be 1 comment per person, 4 minutes. If you're called upon and you have somebody else on the line who wants to make a comment, let me know. That person will be allowed to make a separate comment as well. As Jim mentioned, we're going to start with the people who indicated during registration that they wanted to make a comment in that order. And I have a list of 13 names of people who indicated they want to make a comment. And then once we get through that list of names, then anyone else who has not yet made a comment may make a comment. Just raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you. And then if you're on the phone, you can select #2 on your receiver, and that will raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. And so everyone will have an opportunity to make a comment tonight. So we're going to go through the comments until we get through to everybody's comment, of 1 comment per person, as mentioned. Okay, so the first name on my list is Susan Miller. And Susan, we are going to unmute you. You are unmuted, and you can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. First, a correction. I believe the site is 107 acres, so I'm hoping the project engineer would correct that. Secondly, there are next to no public benefits or community support for this project, nothing to justify the damage to the watercourse and the wetlands degradation. I personally own a piece of land that is sandwiched between Toll Brothers' 2 proposed developments. Toll's plan is to discharge multiple tanker trucks of treated wastewater 24/7 at the border between their property and mine and directly onto my property, as well as discharging the overflow from 3 detention ponds. Their discharge will greatly damage the delicate flora on my property and will degrade the small seasonal stream that now passes through and supports an imperiled wooded wetland. Toll Brothers failed to obtain drainage rights from me as required by ordinance. They are prepared to brazenly violate the natural flow doctrine that has been upheld in Michigan courts over and over, which states that an upstream neighbor does not have the right to increase the flow and velocity of water onto the property of a downstream neighbor. Toll Brothers is finding it necessary to enclose 578 linear feet of the stream, including on the North Preserve, which suggests that they have concern about flooding even before they add any polluted effluent and stormwater to it and direct it across my land. I have the same property rights that Toll Brothers has. EGLE should not be giving a permit to damage my land and the nature, including endangered species, on it. The state of Michigan and all citizens of Michigan have a stake in the preservation of natural features. It is EGLE's responsibility to protect the rights of all citizens. It should not force them to bankrupt themselves pursuing private lawsuits in order to protect fundamental rights. Finally, in the question and answer, the project engineer said that only a 1-year rain event would discharge to my land, but my guess is that those 1-year rain events would be continual, not once a year. And the stream, which is generally dry, cannot accommodate that without significant flooding. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Susan. All right, next up is Elijah Fox. All right, let me see if we can find you in the audience, Elijah. And if not, we'll move on to the next person. And I am not seeing Elijah on tonight. So the next person would be Kevin Seiss, and then Eric Roberts is after Kevin. So Kevin, it looks like you are unmuted on our end, and you can begin when you're ready.
Yeah, good evening. Kevin Seiss, I'm a licensed PE, avid outdoorsman, and I also had an opportunity to run several wastewater treatment plants, up to 800,000 gallons a day over my career in operations. A couple comments regarding this whole setup. I mean, it seems that the piecemeal nature in which the EGLE reviews are happening for these permits leaves many gaps. There's not enough overlap between what you are reviewing and what the wastewater treatment plant permitting folks are reviewing. I understand that you're deferring to them for the water quality aspect of it, but there is a material impact on wetlands can tell you from my time in operations with 100% operation staff 24/7, that stuff still happens. And in this case, these plants are only going to be staffed intermittently. I'm not sure about if they'll have continuous monitoring, but I can assure you over a long enough period of time, the chances of a raw sewage discharge event are 100%. It's just a matter of time, especially the way that these will be staffed and not be continuously an individual on site while discharging. So I guess my opposition to this is both in the framework of a lack of comprehensive review between the permitting agencies. I don't see it so far in the process that the folks reviewing this from the wetlands impact, obviously the Rouse drain is, and the streams associated with it are all tied and linked together. How that's not considered as part of your review when, the effects of the discharge are going to have a negative impact on wetlands, both obviously the ones that are impacted physically on site and anything that it touches downstream. I think that's all I have for this evening.
All right. Thank you for your comments. All right, and I'm not seeing Eric Roberts on the line tonight, and so after Eric was Richard Strader, and then after Richard is Susan Mossner. So Richard, you can begin when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you very much. The only point I really wanted to make tonight is that if you do look at that piece of property, the drain we're talking about really begins further south toward the southern end of what they're proposing as Arbor Preserve South. Most of the rest of that, the area north in the northern part of Arbor Preserve South and Susan Miller's property, and Arbor Preserve North is dry land 66% of the time, according to weather records. So basically, just keep that in mind as you look at this. That you're starting with zero flow to begin with in most parts of this proposed area of flow. And that's it for me.
All right, thanks for your comment, Richard. All right, next up is Susan Mossner. Susan, my apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you can begin when you're ready.
Okay, well, first of all, I wanted to comment that the Toll Brothers representative made some comment about the development being actually on 200 acres, and I don't know where that's even coming from because it's just under 107, so I don't know if he's trying to include somebody else's acreage into all this to influence decision-making. I don't know. So I guess a couple comments. I mean, I feel like, yeah, these permits are interrelated because we're talking about water discharge, runoff discharge, effluent discharge. And I live downstream of this development. And so I'm just concerned with the amount, we're not just talking stormwater, we're talking stormwater with pollutants, runoff with salt, fertilizers, other contaminants, the fuse, and the effect that it is going to have on the water course and on the wetlands. I mean, I have wetlands on my property, and with the water coming down through the property, now it's going to increase the flow. It's going to overflow the banks. I've already experiencing some erosion problems with the infrastructure that's currently in place. I also see, looking at the plans, that their detention ponds on Arbor Preserves North are very close to neighboring property and also close to homes in the trailer park. So what happens when there's overflow of those detention ponds? That first of all, yes, they're going to go across Susan Miller's property, but could they possibly even overflow into the mobile home park next door and have an effect on some of those homes? And then as all this extra runoff goes into the Rouse drain and continues down through the south property and also picks up more there and comes down this creek, this is all coming downstream through all the neighboring properties. And I guess I'm a little concerned because even with the current infrastructure there, I've contacted your department twice in the last year and sent you photos because I've had black, green, slimy water coming down through here. And it's, so there's already pollutants coming down through from what's already there. And so now you're going to add to that. And I've had no response from your department from phone calls. I was told to submit a complaint online, no response. I did have water tests done on it this last time, and it came back that it contained E. coli. And so now we have E. coli going down through the creek, through the property, and your department hasn't even responded. So I guess I have a little concern what's going to happen. Now you're going to add this large development and, more runoff, more pollutants coming downstream. Who's going to be responsible for contamination or, like I said, even erosion where the banks of the creek down here are eroding? I'm losing trees. It's going into some of my wetlands currently. And with some of the erosion on the side of the hill here, it could potentially even cause some damage to my buildings. So I guess who's going to be in control of this once this all happens? And so I have a very big concern there that, these permits get issued, then what? What happens after that? So I guess that's my big concern. Is the damage it's causing and who's responsible?
All right. Well, thanks for your comments, Susan. All right. So next up is James Demore, and then after James is Ann Damon. So James, you are unmuted on our end. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Ryan. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
All right. Good evening to all listening. My name is James Demore, and I'm a former commissioner with the City of Ann Arbor's Planning Commission. I should disclaim I don't live in Lodi Township, but I've been involved for years on land use issues across the Washtenaw County area. I'm speaking tonight to urge EGLE to deny the wetland use permit for the ironically named Ann Arbor Preserve development. This project would disturb high-quality wetlands that form the headwaters of the Rouse Drain, which eventually would flow into the Saline and River Raisin basins. As you well know, these wetlands are not empty land. They are living systems that filter pollutants, store floodwater, and protect groundwater quality. I'm also a stakeholder because the site also lies within the wellhead protection area for the City of Ann Arbor Steer Farm wells, which supplies 15% of the city's drinking water to thousands of residents. Disturbing these wetlands and altering natural hydrology here could jeopardize a critical public water source, particularly as I'm sure your colleagues at EGLE would know, the Steer Farms well is particularly crucial in light of the ongoing Gelman plume issue and how it's threatening the rest of the Ann Arbor city's drinking water. Michigan's Part 303 wetlands protection standards require that developers avoid, minimize, and only then mitigate any impacts. Yet this proposal would fill nearly an acre of wetlands, rely on off-site mitigation, and place infrastructure inside protected setback areas. That does not meet the letter nor the spirit of Part 303. Once these wetlands are gone, they cannot truly be replaced. The long-term costs to our water quality and ecological resilience far outweigh any development gain. I strongly urge EGLE to deny this permit. This agency must protect wetlands, groundwater, and drinking water for future generations. Proving this is counter to this mission. And I would say this is true even with a consent judgment agreed to by Toll Brothers and Lodi Township. That's another issue in and of itself, which is beyond EGLE's jurisdiction, but I don't think that decision should be made under duress. At any rate, thank you for your time and your commitment to protecting Michigan's natural resources. And thank you for considering my remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, James. All right, next up is Ann Damon, and then after Ann is Scott Troya. Ann, you are unmuted on our end and can unmute yourself and begin when you're ready. Are you there, Ann?
I'm here. I wasn't here to speak tonight, but I'm
If-
concerned about.
Can you step closer to your microphone, Ann? We can hardly hear you.
I'm sorry. Okay, is that any better?
It's still very quiet. I mean, we can make it out, but it's very quiet.
All right, so my concern is giving a permit before any testing has been done. Many people are providing you information. To make the decision, I hope you make the correct decision to protect the environment and protect the water and the streams. Still hear me? All right, I'm sorry you're having trouble hearing me.
No, we can hear you. Are you done with your comment, Ann?
I am concerned, yes, I'm done with my comment. I think that Sue Miller spoke quite eloquently about the real concerns about the problems on her property. That it would cause. All right, I'm done.
Well, thanks for your comments, Ann. All right. Before I move on, I just want to let you know that we will show those other ways to make a comment. Again, in case you run out of time or you think of something later, you will be able to have another opportunity to make a comment through one of those other methods that we mentioned earlier, just so you're aware. All right, Scott, you are unmuted on our end and can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Troy, and I'm a staff attorney for the Great Lakes Environmental Law Center, GLELC. First, I'd like to thank EGLE for opening up their staff to having this hearing tonight and listening to the community, as well as next week on both of these permits. I know that that's not always required, and I appreciate them taking the time to do that. GLELC is a nonprofit environmental legal firm with a two-pronged focus, one on protecting the natural resources of the Great Lakes region, and the other to ensure that those natural resources continue to thrive in perpetuity, with a particular focus on ensuring that the environmental costs of living in our modern society do not unfairly overburden populations that are underserved or underrepresented in the political and bureaucratic establishments. This particular project, the Arbor Preserve project, that is the focus of this Part 303 permit in hearing, it caught GLELC's attention because it is a project that clearly encapsulates the problems that can arise from suburban sprawl if it's not properly and fairly developed according to state law and regulations. It is a project to develop the high-end luxury homes that will likely be valued at just under $1 million each threshold. Now, these two artificial and highly manicured and gated neighborhoods are planned in a largely agricultural and rural area and will surround a long pre-existing mobile home community. The current residential community has expressed deep concern with the impacts this project will have on the natural resources surrounding their neighborhood, also provides their drinking water, and it has long been preserved in Lodi Township, as well as being the source for their drinking water. This juxtaposition warrants careful review by the department. Now, the scope of this hearing is related to Part 303 permits. And Part 303 is fairly unique in the environmental permitting regime of the state because the value of wetlands and the permanence of the impacts. Thus, the scope of review goes beyond just the impacts on the environment. It includes impacts on the community, including such factors as historic, cultural, and scenic impacts, among others. In fact, Part 303 of the MCL states that the department shall not issue a Part 303 permit unless the activity is in the public interest and shall consider the state constitutional mandate of protecting the environment from unnecessary pollution, impairment, or destruction. This is a mandatory balancing requirement in Part 303 imposed by the legislature on the department. Likewise, a permittee bears the burden to show that either the proposed activity is dependent on being in a wetland, or there is no feasible and prudent alternative. Clearly, building million-dollar homes is not required to occur in a wetland. Thus, Toll Brothers has the burden to show that there is no feasible and prudent alternative. Toll Brothers' application misstates this requirement as showing that their project is the most feasible and prudent. That is not the standard. The standard of whether or not there are any other feasible, prudent alternatives. If there are, the permit must be denied. Toll Brothers have not met this burden. First, they don't even consider whether they could build their development in an area that would have either less impact on the wetlands of the state and the neighboring community, or they don't build at all. Part 303 regulations state the assumption is that there is a feasible and alternative to the project. This includes utilizing lands in a different spot than the
Scott,
prospective.
your time's up, so you take a couple seconds and wrap your comments up, and then we'll have to move on.
Sure. It is uncontested this project will impair or destroy wetlands of the state. As such, the department needs to do a full analysis of all the detrimental impacts on both the wetlands at issue as well as the current community and as part of their public interest balancing determination. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. All right, so next up is Dixon Hammond. And then after Dixon is Patricia Haroon. Dixon, you are unmuted and can begin.
Thank you so much. First, I think I can clarify some confusion earlier. Jason had mentioned that it was 200 acres, and I think he's confused with the consent judgment, which covers 200 acres, but the development is only 107 acres. Also, Jason stated that the plans are for 1 house per net acre, which is not true. It's 1 unit per gross acre, which normally would not be allowed. 1 unit per net acre would only be 77 units. Jason also started by mentioning that the plan started with 400 units, but failed to mention that that was never approved, nor would it ever be so to meet township ordinances. R3 zoning would only allow 77 units, but the developer keeps saying that they compromised from an imaginary 400 units. It's like saying, hey, we're bulldozing the land, but that's a big improvement over dropping a bomb on it. Also, the wastewater treatment plants are designed for less than 2 people per household, which is a gross underestimate. These are 5,000 square foot luxury homes, so all the math for effluent should be many times higher than what the developer keeps stating. Be aware, these are rare wetland areas, both in the proposed project sites and centered within the sites that have been untouched since before development. This includes trees and wetlands that are over 200 years old. They existed before the state of Michigan was founded. The developer conveniently omitted these facts in the preliminary site plans and again omitted these facts in their final site plans submitted in February. Only in May, in the updated plans, did they make a vague mention of it. This is a rare natural resource and one of the few remaining in the area. EGLE's mission statement is to, quote, to protect Michigan's environment and public health by managing air, water, land, and energy resources. Given this, I urge you to protect these rare and imperiled natural resources and deny this permit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. All right, next up is Patricia Haroon. Are you there, Patricia?
Yes, I'm here. It's Varun.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you. So Toll Brothers has a poor track record with stormwater management, and I want you to be aware of this, that they have paid over $770,000 in stormwater violations on permits. These were just on your permits, other state permits. These are just on permits where they had to file. These are only the places where they have been able to be held accountable. And there is always a little slippage in any industry, so there could be unrecorded damage of wetlands. when someone has this kind of track record. Because they have this poor track record, they are not the appropriate developer for land that has this much wetland. We, as residents of Lodi Township, have offered them other solutions, have suggested that they put some of this land into a preserve so that their name actually reflected something of, instead of destruction, it should actually be called destruction north and south. And they have refused. They have told us that they wanted to put gates up because that's quote unquote the kind of clientele they wanted to attract, unquote. They are willing to turn their eye from the fact that they're within 1,000 feet of the isolation area for the drinking wells of the modular community Orchard Grove. And that is actually a very serious thing for you all to look at. And I'm not sure if it's and that might be for the next hearing, but they have done so many things. I am not against developing that area, but I am against it being developed without ethics, without consciousness of the future, without the fact that there are a lot of people who live south of this area and will be affected by stormwater runoff, by the constant add of effluent and velocity and volume of moistures running down, as well as the fact that some people south of this area already are having to drop their wells. So there's another whole issue that's not necessarily in your domain. So the fact that they have a poor track record with handling stormwater, and I'm sure that leads to how they handle wetlands. The fact that they are wanting to, the fact that they want to bulldoze the wetlands, clear cut over 4,000 trees, that in alone will cause water retention loss and be an issue without anything else added. Thank you so much for letting me say my comments.
Yeah, thanks for your comments, Patricia. All right, I do have one more name on my list, Jeff Jones, but it doesn't look like Jeff is logged on. So at this point, we're going to go to everybody else who has not yet made a comment on the line and who would like to. So just, if you haven't made a comment yet and you'd like to make a comment tonight, just raise your hand in Zoom. So click the raise hand icon and we'll call on you in order using the last, or using your name. And if you're on the phone, you can select #2. Looks like we do have 1 or 2 phone and callers. If you're on the phone, you can select #2, which will raise your hand in Zoom. And we will call on you using the last 4 digits of your phone number. So looks like we have at least one raised hand. Suzanne Bauch. Again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Suzanne.
It's okay. I am Suzanne Bakush, and I've been a Lodi Township taxpayer for 30 years, and I support Toll Brothers development and wetland mitigation plans because the wetlands are being mitigated. Toll has worked with the township to lessen the impacts on the wetlands within the development. Also, these are low-quality wetlands. They are wetlands that developed over time because the field has not been maintained like it was when it was actively farmed. But tonight you have heard from Susan Miller and may hear from Lodi Township Board of Trustee member Ms. Leslie Blackburn, who want to sabotage this development. During the October 20th, 2025 Lodi Township Board of Trustees meeting, Lodi trustee Ms. Blackburn attempted to extort Toll Brothers by proposing she would approve the final site plan for Arbor Preserves North and South if Toll Brothers bought her friend Susan Miller's property. Ms. Blackburn, an elected Lodi Board of Trustee member, has founded Livable Lodi, a grassroots organization that is supposedly not affiliated with the government of Lodi Township, yet is founded by Leslie Blackburn as an elected official in Lodi Township. This is illegal, unethical, and extortionate by Ms. Blackburn. Ms. Blackburn is illegally pursuing by any means and jointly with Susan Miller to extort Toll Brothers, soundly rejected by their attorney, Mr. Alan Green, in the presence of Lodi Township Attorney Jesse O'Jack, and oppose the consent judgment decreed in a court of law. In her pursuit of sabotaging this development, Ms. Blackburn has solicited, along with her friend Susan Miller online, and I quote, "See if you can find a protected animal like a snake or a salamander. If you know an environmental engineer or someone with watershed knowledge, get them on board ASAP and try to get an environmental impact paper together. They are desperate to trespass and use any illegal means in their attempt to get back at Toll Brothers. Susan Miller is sabotaging this development because the developer's attorney, Alan Green, rejected her illegal attempt to influence an elected Board of Trustee member to vote yes on Toll Brothers' final site plan in return for Toll Brothers buying Susan Miller's land. And it's not all gloom and doom for the neighbors. The Orchard Groves Mobile Home Park and other neighbors support this development as well, and which I have submitted along with my online submittal. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Suzanne. All right, is there anybody else out there who has not yet made a comment and would like to? Just click the raise hand icon in Zoom. That will raise your hand. If you're on the phone, you can select #2. If we don't have any other people who want to make a comment tonight, we're going to go through those other ways to make a comment and provide Jim's contact information in case you have further questions. All right, and it looks like we do have a raised hand. Sarah Ladd. So Sarah, we are going to unmute you, and then you can begin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I think for me, the big picture here is that this is nowhere near a final site plan. For over a decade, the developer has tried to just push something through so they can get in and make their profits. There's approximately 10 acres, 10.5 acres of wetlands on the property, and you're quoting an acre that would be developed, but yet at the board meeting, the so-called final site plan, there were no actual setbacks, and the builder refused to delineate the wetlands that actually exist on the property. EGLE, you are representing water quality and the Great Lakes. This sewage flow will go into the Rouse Drain, the River Raisin, and the Saline River, ultimately Lake Erie. None of the fish in any of these bodies of water are edible anymore. The Saline River has overflows of sewage and cleanup, and not to mention the Huron River, that is often polluted with E. coli and closed for recreation. So if you look at the cumulative impact of all of our waterways in Washtenaw County, certainly 100 houses will make a big impact, an environmental impact. There is definitely a feasible alternative, building fewer houses with wells and septic tanks like our township provides in our bylaws. As far as public benefit, someone else mentioned there is no need for million-dollar homes in Lodi Township, Ann Arbor, or Washtenaw County. I think they're going on a if we build it, they will come type of philosophy. They submitted 75 pages of information, demographic and financial information, and none of it backed up the claim that these houses are needed or will provide a public benefit. Which leads me to the idea that Toll Brothers has a 1-star rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have an extensive history of environmental violations all over the country, specifically stormwater violations. Not to mention, circling back to public benefit, they claim that they would benefit the economy in our area by providing jobs, and their other highest violations and lawsuits are regards to OSHA and the way they treat their builders and their employees, who they often import from Ohio, Indiana, and lower income communities so that they can pay them less to build their properties. I also think it's important to acknowledge that there is a lot of coercion and collusion going on in this project. Our board is afraid of being sued. They threaten us with $400 houses and lawsuits if we don't approve their project. And it's important to mention that the property during the permit process that the current owners listed on the property harvested an unknown number of black walnut trees, which is against township and county laws. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Sarah. All right, is there anybody else who has not yet made a comment? You can just click the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen if you haven't made a comment yet and would like to, or if you're on the phone, select #2. If we don't get any more raised hands, then what we'll do is we'll close the hearing part out and go through some other information for you, and then wrap up the hearing for tonight. So I am not seeing any other raised hands. So Jim, would you want to read the closing statement for us tonight?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comments and cooperation. We appreciate your interest in the proposed project and that you took the time to be here tonight. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, you may submit additional written comments until November 7th. Following the close of the public comment period, we will consider all comments received and make a decision on the proposed project. Just to remind those that may still want to submit a comment, comments can be submitted via the MyEnviro portal, by email, or the US mail. The hearing is now closed. Thank you again.
Yeah, many thanks, Jim. As Jim mentioned, there's other ways to make a comment. We've got those on the screen. We'll be putting these in the chat again. First one's through MyEnviro, your submission HQA-A27Z-K6DZS, or by mail to EGLE Water Resources Division, Jackson District Office, Post Office Box 30458, Lansing, Michigan 48909-7958. And the comment period will be open until November 7th, 2025. All right, in case we didn't get to your question or you have further questions, as promised, here's Jim's contact information. Jim Bales, whose phone number is 517-257-4532, or by email at balesj@michigan.gov. So balesj@michigan.gov. All right, any closing comments for us tonight, Jeff?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for participating in this hearing tonight. I think we received quite a few comments that we're going to be looking over the next weeks as we continue to wrap up our review of the application. As Jim said, we'll have a decision made by early December. But again, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to join us tonight and provide us with information and comments. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks to you both tonight and to everyone who is on the line. Last thing I'll leave you with is just a reminder that this hearing was recorded, and we'll be posting it on our YouTube channel in a day or two, so you can watch it again if you would like to, or forward it on. So with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.